Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Definition. Its ALS is a progressive neurodegenerative disease that affects nerve cells in the brain and spinal cord, causing motor neurons to slow down and die.
No doubt you've already heard of the Ice Bucket Challenge, and maybe you've participated too. But what do you know about the disease behind this challenge, known as ALS or MND? ALS stands for Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. It is a motor neuron disease, and therefore in some countries better known as MND. In the U.S., the disease is also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, after a famous baseball player who died of ALS. ALS is a neurologic disorder that causes increasing muscle weakness and eventually paralysis, which, in most cases, is fatal. Our brain sends signals through our nervous system to make our muscles move. ALS affects the motor neurons that carry these signals. The neurons in the brain and the spinal cord degenerate and die, causing the muscles to gradually weaken and the brain to lose control over voluntary muscle movement. This leads to all sorts of problems, such as increasing loss of mobility in the limbs and difficulties with speech, swallowing, and even breathing. ALS is an irreversible and progressive disease. Patients usually die within 3 to 5 years after diagnosis, primarily due to failure of the respiratory muscles. Each year, 1 to 2 people per 100,000 are diagnosed with ALS. Scientists don't yet know how or why the disease develops, and unfortunately there is no cure or treatment today. It is currently only possible to slow down the progression of the disease. In other words, a lot of money is needed to fund ALS research. So, when you pour a bucket of ice water over your head, don't forget to also make a donation.
Application in nursing. Keep patients as active as possible. Prevent skin breakdown. Prevent vein thrombosis, pulmonary, and embolism. To assist patients through grief and giving process. To assist family to deal with patient and grief process. To assist patients in accepting new body, image in maintaining self-esteem.
What are the signs and symptoms of ALS? ALS is a disease that attacks the nerves which control muscle movement. As the disease progresses, patients lose the ability to control their muscles. This leads to weakness and eventually paralysis. However, the changes are gradual, usually taking place over several years. The symptoms can be quite subtle at first, and the disease affects everyone differently, which can make it difficult to diagnose. In some patients, the first sign of ALS is muscle weakness or a lack of motor control in the arms and legs. For example, the person may have difficulty buttoning clothes or find themselves tripping even when walking on a flat surface. For other people, the disease may first affect the muscles of the throat and tongue, making it more difficult to swallow or speak. In a few cases, the muscles that control breathing are the first to be affected, leading to shortness of breath. Muscle cramps and twitching can also be early symptoms of ALS. In rare cases, patients also experience uncontrollable bouts of laughter or crying, even though they don't really feel very happy or sad. None of these symptoms by themselves mean that a person has ALS. They could be symptoms of another illness, or they could mean nothing at all. Anyone can be clumsy or tongue-tied or out of breath at times. If someone does have ALS, though, these symptoms will become progressively more noticeable, and the muscle weakness will spread to other parts of the body. If you do have any of these symptoms, talk to your doctor. ALS is hard to diagnose, and many other diseases must be ruled out first. Even with a diagnosis, it's recommended that you get a second opinion. If you or someone you love has been diagnosed with ALS, you can get help, get support, and get involved by contacting your local chapter of the ALS Association.
Pros and cons. Pros. Pharmacological treatment relieves symptoms and improves the quality of life of patients. Riluzole. Physical therapy and special equipment enhance patient independence and safety. Cons. Over time, people who suffer from it may become totally paralyzed. The brain loses the ability to initiate and control the movement of muscles.
Welcome to 2-Minute Neuroscience, where I simplistically explain neuroscience topics in 2 minutes or less. In this installment, I will discuss amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS. Also known as Lou Gehrig's disease in the US and motor neuron disease in the UK, ALS is characterized both by muscle spasticity and a progressive weakening of the muscles. As the disease progresses, patients may lose hand and arm function and experience difficulty walking, speaking, and even breathing. Respiratory failure is often the cause of death, and the average survival time from diagnosis is around 3 to 5 years. Although some cases of ALS are inherited, in the vast majority of cases the cause of ALS is unknown. ALS is a neurodegenerative disorder, meaning it is characterized by the degeneration and death of neurons. Specifically, the affected neurons in ALS are called upper and lower motor neurons. Upper motor neurons extend from the cerebral cortex or brainstem and carry motor information down to the spinal cord. Lower motor neurons extend from the spinal cord or brainstem to skeletal muscle to cause movement. Degeneration of upper motor neurons often is responsible for spasticity and modest weakness, but degeneration of lower motor neurons causes more disabling weakness. As the motor neurons stop working, muscles also begin to atrophy. Mutations in several genes have been linked to the development of ALS, but the effects of the mutations are not completely clear, and the mechanism that causes neurodegeneration in ALS is still not understood. Similar to other neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's disease, ALS is characterized by the accumulation of dysfunctional proteins within neurons. Although the impact of these protein groups or aggregates is unclear, it is hypothesized that they could impair neuronal function. There also are a number of other mechanisms proposed to play a role in neurodegeneration in ALS, and it is likely more than one is involved.
Issue applied in Ecuador. According to statistics, they point out that pathology in Ecuador occurs in people between 25 and 40 years old, contrary to the global figures that indicate that the symptoms usually appear until after 60 years.
Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, is a nervous system disease that attacks nerve cells called neurons in your brain and spinal cord. These neurons transmit messages from your brain and spinal cord to your voluntary muscles, the ones you can control, like in your arms and legs. At first, this causes mild muscle problems. Some people notice trouble walking or running, trouble writing, or speech problems. Eventually, you lose your strength and cannot move. When muscles in your chest fail, you cannot breathe. A breathing machine can help, but most people with ALS die from respiratory failure.
The disease usually strikes between age 40 and 60. More men than women get it. No one knows what causes ALS. It can run in families, but usually it strikes at random. There is no cure. Medicines can relieve symptoms and, sometimes, prolong survival.
Conclusions. In conclusion, although today no treatment is known that achieves the definitive cure of ALS, affected people can improve their quality of life following the treatment prescribed by the doctor.
For many Chinese, their first time hearing about ALS came after celebrities like actress Zhang Ziyi took up the ice bucket challenge. But for 41-year-old Chen Changming, a patient diagnosed with ALS, the disease is a daily reality. Before his diagnosis, Chen was an award-winning engineer behind a number of bridges in neighboring Zhejiang province, but he has now been bedridden for over 3 years. His wife has witnessed firsthand how ALS drained the energy out of her husband.
It started with a drag in his walk in 2010. Then it got worse. He felt less and less strength in his legs. Half a year later, he couldn't walk without holding on to someone else.
Doctors say the disease causes patients' muscles to shrink and gradually lose their motor skills as if their bodies are frozen.
100 years after discovering ALS, the medical community remains unclear about how the disease works. Simply put, when the nerves fail to control the muscles begin shrinking gradually. In the end, almost all patients die of respiratory failure.
After 5 years of frequent hospital visits and 400,000 yuan in medical bills, Chen is still fighting the disease. Some face even heavier financial burdens. The only medicine in the world that has shown signs of effectively treating ALS costs over 4,000 yuan a month and is not covered by medical insurance, forcing many patients to simply give up hope of their condition improving. The worst part of the disease for Chen, despite losing his bodily functions, his mind remains crystal clear as he watches the toll his illness has taken on his family. His wife hardly leaves the house because Chen needs constant care. She doesn't get much sleep either, helping Chen turn over in bed an average of 15 times a night. Their 10-year-old daughter, now a skilled home nurse, helping suction away her dad's phlegm. Speaking to us through a computer that transforms his eye movements into words, Chen says, "I want more people to know how difficult our conditions are and the level of pressure our families live under." As for Chen's wife, she has come to terms with the daily struggle.
All I want now is to stay healthy myself so I can continue taking care of my husband.
It's words like these that have kept this family together as they continue to live with ALS. 中时 CCTV